July 5th, 1984. A sold-out stadium, 75,000 people screaming one name. But in the crowd that day, some weren't there to celebrate. They were there to invest. Diego Maradona stepped off the plane in Naples, and the city lost its mind. You have to understand something about Naples in 1984. This wasn't just another Italian city. This was the forgotten corner of Italy, the South, the place where money never reached, where the government turned its back, where people survived on their own terms. And for 60 years, Napoli, the football club, had won nothing. Nothing. The North had Juventus, Milan had Inter and AC Milan. Rome had their clubs. But Naples? Naples had poverty, crime, and a football team that couldn't win. So when Maradona arrived, it wasn't just about football. It was about pride. It was about finally having something the rich northern cities didn't have. The greatest player in the world. Maradona was 23 years old. He'd just left Barcelona, a club that had broken him in more ways than one. The injuries, the pressure, the politics, the betrayal. He wanted a fresh start. He wanted to feel that love again, that pure, unconditional love he'd felt as a kid in Argentina. And Naples? Naples was ready to give him that love. But love in Naples came with strings attached. The morning of his presentation, the streets were flooded. Not with rain, with people. Tens of thousands lined the roads from the airport to the stadium. They hung from balconies, climbed street lights, stopped traffic. Some had been waiting since dawn, standing in the summer heat just to catch a glimpse of him. When Maradona's car passed, grown men cried. Mothers held up their babies, hoping he'd see them. Old women made the sign of the cross, as if a saint was passing by. Children ran alongside the car, screaming his name until their voices gave out. This wasn't a footballer arriving. This was a savior coming to rescue a forgotten city. But here's what Maradona didn't see. In that crowd, scattered among the fans, were men who didn't cheer, men who watched, men who made eye contact with each other across the street and nodded slowly, men from the Camorra. They stood still while everyone around them jumped and screamed. They wore dark sunglasses even though the sun was setting. They didn't wave flags or sing songs. They just watched Maradona's car pass. And they smiled because they knew something the fans didn't. San Paulo Stadium, 75,000 people packed inside. If you were there that day, you remember the noise. It wasn't just loud, it was deafening. It shook the concrete under your feet. Flags everywhere, blue and white, waving like an ocean. Fireworks exploding in the sky, smoke filling the air. The whole city had come to witness this moment. Maradona walked onto the pitch in his new blue Napoli jersey, number 10 on his back. He smiled. He waved. He juggled the ball for the crowd, and every touch, every single touch, sent the stadium into absolute madness. People were crying. Strangers were hugging each other. Grown men who'd spent their whole lives watching Napoli lose were suddenly believers again. For a kid from Villa Fiorito, the poorest neighborhood in Buenos Aires, where houses were made of sheet metal and dirt roads turned to mud when it rained, this must have felt like a dream. He'd gone from nothing to everything. He'd gone from kicking a ball in the slums to being worshipped by an entire city. But dreams in Naples had a price. Up in the executive boxes, away from the screaming masses, sat the men who really ran the city. They wore expensive suits, Italian leather shoes, gold watches. They didn't cheer. They didn't wave flags. They didn't need to. They just watched. And they smiled. Because to them, Maradona wasn't a footballer. He was an opportunity. He was an investment. He was the key to keeping this restless, angry, desperate city calm for a few more years. You see, Naples in the 1980s wasn't controlled by politicians or police. It was controlled by the Camorra, one of the oldest and most powerful crime organizations in Italy. Older than the Sicilian Mafia, more ruthless, more embedded in everyday life. They ran the docks, they controlled the construction industry, they owned the markets, they decided who got rich and who stayed poor. They were the invisible hand that guided everything in Naples. And they understood something very important about power. You don't control people through fear alone. You control them through hope. Maradona wasn't just coming to play football. He was coming to give this city hope, to give people something to believe in, to make them forget for 90 minutes every week that they lived in the poorest, most neglected corner of Italy. And when people are happy, when people have hope, they don't riot, they don't protest, they don't cause trouble. So keeping Maradona safe, keeping him happy, keeping him in Naples, that wasn't charity. It was strategy. Maradona thought he was free that day. He thought he'd escaped the politics and pressure of Barcelona. He thought Naples would be different. But freedom is a strange thing in a city where everyone answers to someone. A few days later, Maradona was at dinner, a quiet restaurant in the old part of the city. Small tables, candles, good wine, good food. He was trying to relax, adjust to his new life. The pressure of Barcelona was behind him now. Here he could breathe. Here people loved him. Then a man approached his table. He was older, maybe 50, well-dressed, respectful. He didn't force himself into the conversation. He just stood there, a few feet away, hands folded, smiling politely. "Signor Maradona," he said. His voice was calm, gentle. "Welcome to Naples. We are so happy you are here." Maradona smiled back. He was used to this. Everywhere he went, fans wanted to say hello, shake his hand, tell him how much he meant to them. "Thank you," Maradona said. "The people here have been incredible." The man nodded. "We want you to know something," he continued. "You are protected here. Naples loves you, and we will make sure nothing bad happens to you. Ever." Maradona nodded. "That's very kind. I appreciate it." The man's smile widened just a little. "No need to thank us, Signor Maradona. It's what we do, for family." And then he walked away, quietly. No fuss, no autograph request, no photo, just a message delivered. Maradona thought nothing of it, just another passionate fan, another person overwhelmed by emotion, wanting to express their love. But that man wasn't a fan. He was connected to the Camorra, high up, and the message he delivered wasn't kindness. It was ownership. You belong to us now. In the weeks that followed, Maradona started noticing things, small things, things that didn't seem important at first, things you could easily dismiss if you weren't paying attention. But sometimes the small things are what matter most. Everywhere Maradona went, there were people, not fans asking for autographs, not journalists hoping for an interview, just people standing on street corners, sitting in cafes, parked in cars outside his apartment building. They didn't approach him, they didn't wave, they didn't bother him. They just watched. At first, Maradona thought it was normal. He was famous. He was the biggest thing to happen to Naples in decades. Of course, people were curious. Of course, they wanted to see them. But then he started noticing a pattern. The same faces. Every day. the same man sitting in the same cafe across from his apartment. The same car parked on the corner every morning when he left for training. The same two men standing outside the restaurant when he went to dinner. They weren't hiding. They weren't trying to be subtle. They wanted him to see them. One night after a long training session, Maradona asked one of his teammates about it. "Those guys outside my apartment," he said, "the ones who are always there. Do you know them?" His teammate glanced out the locker room window. He saw the men. He looked back at Maradona and shrugged like it was the most normal thing in the world. "They're just making sure you're safe," he said. "I didn't ask for security." His teammate smiled a little. "You don't have to ask. The Camorra takes care of their own." Maradona felt something shift in his chest, a small knot of unease. "I'm not—" "You're in Naples now," his teammate said quietly. "That makes you family, and family gets protected, whether they ask for it or not." Maradona didn't fully understand. Not yet, but he was starting to. Because in Naples, protection wasn't optional. It wasn't a favor you could decline. It was automatic, and it came with expectations. The Camorra had invested heavily in Napoli. They'd put money into the club. They'd helped bring Maradona here, and now they wanted to make sure their investment paid off. Not through threats, not through violence, not through intimidation, through presence. They were always there, always watching, always reminding him, without ever saying a word, that he wasn't alone, and that he never would be. Maradona was beginning to understand that love and control can look exactly the same. Both hold you close, both make you feel special, both make you feel like you matter. But one lets you go when you want to leave, and the other never does. Months passed. Maradona played brilliantly. He was everything Naples had hoped for and more. He danced through defenders like they weren't there. He scored impossible goals. He made 75,000 people believe in magic every single week. Napoli started winning. Actually winning, climbing the table, beating teams they had no business beating. The city was in heaven, and the men who protected Maradona became more visible. They were at every match now, not in the stands with the fans, in the private boxes. In the locker room tunnel before and after games, at team dinners, at the clubs Maradona went to on Saturday nights. They never asked for anything. They never made demands. They never told him what to do. They just existed, always nearby, always watching, always there. And slowly, subtly, Maradona started to feel it. That invisible weight, that subtle pressure, that sense that every decision he made, every place he went, every person he talked to, it was all being observed. He couldn't go to a restaurant without someone from the Camorra being there. He couldn't leave his apartment without seeing the same faces on the street. He couldn't make a friend, meet a woman, go to a party. Nothing was private anymore. One night late, he stood at his apartment window looking out at the city. The lights of Naples sparkled below him. Beautiful, alive, chaotic. And on the street, 4 floors down, parked under a streetlight, was a black car. Engine off, windows dark, someone inside, just sitting there, watching. Maradona stared at it for a long time, and then, finally, he understood. This was his new reality. The love Naples gave him, the screaming fans, the worship, the adoration. It wasn't free. It came with guardians. It came with watchers. It came with men who had their own reasons for keeping him safe. The Camorra didn't want him to fail. They didn't want him to leave. They didn't want him to embarrass the city or cause problems or become a liability. They wanted him to stay, to play, to win, to keep the people happy. And they would make sure that happened, no matter what. Maradona thought about leaving, about calling his agent and asking for a transfer, about going somewhere quieter, somewhere simpler, somewhere he could breathe. But he also loved it here. He loved the passion. He loved the fans. He loved the way the city treated him like a god. So he stayed. And little by little, without even realizing it, Maradona stopped asking questions. He stopped wondering who those men were. He stopped thinking about why they were always there. He stopped trying to have privacy. He just accepted it. Because in Naples, some things you don't ask about, some things you don't question, some things you just learn to live with. What Maradona didn't know yet was that acceptance has a cost he'd be paying for years to come, a cost that would eventually consume him. July 5th, 1984. 75,000 people welcomed Maradona to Naples. They cheered, they cried, they sang his name until their voices were hoarse. And somewhere in that crowd, men in expensive suits looked at each other and nodded, because they knew something the fans didn't. Maradona thought he was coming to Naples for football. But football was just the beginning. What he'd really walked into was a city where love, loyalty, and power were impossible to separate, where protection meant control, where the Camorra didn't rule through fear. They ruled through family, through loyalty, through bonds you couldn't break even if you wanted to. And the saddest part? He'd wanted this. He'd wanted to be loved. He'd wanted to be needed. He'd wanted to matter. He'd wanted to feel like he belonged somewhere. And Naples gave him exactly that, just not in the way he expected. Naples embraced Maradona that summer, but embraces can be warm, or they can be cages. In the months ahead, Maradona would learn the difference. And by then, walking away wouldn't be an option anymore. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more.